Hello everyone, this is FC Construct with a review for the Nicehck x49 IEM. It's a pair of IEMs that actually cost about 15 to 16 USD, and it was sent to me by HiFiGo for quick review. It's a single balanced armature IEM, so there's only a single BA in here, which makes it a bit of a rarity at this price point. I can't actually think of any other IEMs that are single BA at this price. So accessories, it comes with a couple pair of, well, it comes with a standard set of tips. So that's the large set of tips, the medium set of tips are right on here, and the small set of tips. It also comes with a little cable organizer. I don't use that. And yeah, that's basically it for accessories. Not big, not a lot of fanfare considering it only costs $20. So the in-ears itself, you can see that it's actually made of a pretty nice metal shell here. It feels pretty sturdy, the shell itself. You can see, I wonder if you can see that here. You can see the name Nicehck and x49 on this back. One thing to note that it is vented, so there is a little vent there. The cables are not interchangeable, unfortunately. And frankly speaking, this cable sucks. Like it's really tangly. It's kind of this rubbery feel to it. I really dislike it. And it has a lot of cable noise, so I can be scratching like even the bottom down here, and I can hear it all the way through the top of the ears. Okay, so putting that aside, let's go on to talk about the sound. So for the sound, considering that these are single balanced armatures, like these are single BAs, you do get that characteristic balanced armature kind of timbre, the timbre. It sounds a little dry, but it does have other characteristics, such as it's fast, it's quite reactive, and that's really seen in the bass. So I'm quite surprised actually with these IEMs, because the amount of bass in these in-ears is actually quite a bit. There's a good quantity, it feels full. Despite having the bass characteristics, it really fills out the sound of the overall tone profile of these. What really helps with that is the seal. These IEMs, I can get a very good seal with them, simply because as soon as I put these in my ear, I can tell whether I have a perfect seal or if my seal is broken in any way. And it's very easy to feel that. You can kind of feel like it doesn't sit right. So because of that, every time I have these on, I can get a perfect seal, and the bass response is always consistent in how full it is and how much volume there really is, the quantity. It's so, like I mentioned, it's punchy, it's reactive, which makes it very good for instruments such as the bass guitar, where you really want to follow up, where the speed of the guitar, you can really hear that each note quite easily, and you can keep track of that. For music that is well produced with drums and like the kick drum, it sounds quite nice actually. You don't get any of that muddiness. You don't get kind of like that syrupy slowness of certain poorly implemented dynamic drivers. You just get a clean, fast sound with these balanced armatures in here. So I actually don't mind that. I've heard a lot of budget in-ears with way worse bass responses, and these, I will say, are definitely one of my favorite in terms of budget, despite being, fully BA. The quality of the bass itself isn't great. It's still, balanced armature. It's not amazing. There isn't a lot of texture, but for what it is, like the price, I'm pretty happy with that actually. So yeah, it really takes advantage of the transient response, the speed of the balanced armature, and it's very clean, I think. So now let's talk about the mids. Honestly, the mids are wonky. There's no way around it. So it is a warm IEM. The bass, you obviously have the elevated bass response, and I'll show some graphs a bit later. And that carries on through in the mids, and it gives it a bit of a warm sound. But the problem with these is that it doesn't have a lot of pinna gain. So if you're not sure what pinna gain is, it's the rise in gain or volume around 2 to 4K to compensate for your ear's natural anatomy, and typically it's very dependent on IEMs how they do this, but typically you want a decent amount of pinna gain to compensate for, like I said, your ear anatomy, and these IEMs don't really have that. And what that leads to is that it leads to a bit of a hazy sort of sound. Vocals don't cut through with enough clarity. In my experience, you really want some 2 to 4K for your vocals to cut right through in the mix, and these just don't have that. But I'll get to one caveat later though. So yeah, the upper mid sound a little wonky. The weird thing with these IEMs is that they have a massive peak around 3K hertz, 3.5K, and you don't really hear that I don't really hear it as a huge peak that kind of like is really jarring. What I hear it as, it kind of blends in with the overall sound, but I do hear it when it comes to electric guitar. So sometimes you'll hear the tone of an electric guitar just kind of like shoot right through, and it sounds a little off to me. But as a whole, you just get kind of this weird hazy sort of vocal response from these IEMs. I will say though, it's very genre dependent. So for slower songs, especially male vocals, songs, especially like kind of ballads, sort of jazzy type of songs. If you listen to any city pop, like those Japanese 80s music, that sort of thing, those are actually quite okay because it doesn't require vocals to necessarily cut through the mix where there's a lot of instruments going on. But when it comes to music like rock and metal, yeah, these IEMs really suffer due to the lack of clarity around that region. Okay, I'm just going to talk about the treble now. So the treble, I would classify it as I would say edemotic like. And what I mean by that is it's not a very bright in-ear. There is some treble roll-off that you can hear, but it's also not very dark either. I wouldn't call this a dark in-ear. So it has adequate amount of treble to make it not sound muffled or super dark, but that's not priority. The priority really are, in this case, kind of the bass and a bit of the upper mid-range. Cymbals can sound a little bit muted, and the lack of air does make it sound a little bit suffocated. But as a whole, I think the tone of these in-ears, they're a little weird, but I'm completely okay with them at the end. Well, I'm mostly okay with them at the end of the day. When you first listen to them, especially coming from something with a more neutral tone, these will sound weird. Like frankly, these sound off. But you listen to them for 1 or 2 hours, and you know what? They kind of become okay. Not the best, but it's $20. It's passable, I would say. Now, technical ability. I would say these, for a lot of in-ears, they have about an average kind of sound stage. And I would say these have about that sort of same sound stage response. I would say it's very slightly larger than your typical edemotic IEM, such as the ER4. I've only heard the ER4 with worse imaging, but a bit of a larger stage is you kind of play that trade-off game. Detour retrieval on these in-ears are actually surprisingly pretty good. So for the balance, you can clearly hear the balanced armature doing a lot of work. I keep saying the word fast, and I don't really know what the science behind it is, but you can feel like it picks up a lot of the small details that might be lost in in-ear, like with with a dynamic driver. So I'm actually pretty pleased with the amount of detail retrieval you can get, especially with the cost of $20. And the other really nice thing about it is that because it's a single BA, you don't run into any coherency issues that come as part of a multi-driver setup. So it doesn't sound like it clashes with itself. It has that kind of clean, cohesive, all-in-one sort of sound. Of course, I mentioned the timbre a bit earlier. It's still balanced armature, but to me, it doesn't sound as distinctively balanced armature as something, once again, like the edemotic. It's not as completely sterile, I think. And part of that may be due to the venting. and the driver actually inside of these in-ears. So as a whole, I think that the sound of these for $20 is pretty passable. I'm okay with it. I wouldn't go out of my way to actually buy these, but if I were giving them as a gift, or if you got them as part of an AliExpress loot bag, there are way worse you can go for. Also, because of how small it is, these actually are not bad for sleeping, I think. You want to be a bit careful you don't like kind of suffocate or choke yourself to death with them if they wrap around your neck, but these like disappear right into my ear and I can have them on for quite a long amount of time. Isolation is pretty decent as well, because once again they go kind of right into your ear. Okay, so here are some graphs for the Nicehck x49. As you can see, it has a significant bass response, and it extends actually quite well with a roll-off starting around 40 hertz. That's about as good as you're really going to get. A lot of IEMs typically start rolling off around there. Once again, like I said, you get a very good and very consistent seal with these in-ears because you can feel the second it doesn't seal. So once again it has that full sound. As soon as you put it in, you know you consistently get the full bass response. Despite what it looks like coming in with quite a bit of bleed into the mids, I don't really consider this IEM muddy at all, actually. Once again, it's a single BA. It has that, by definition sort of, it kind of has that coherency because it doesn't need to clash with other drivers. So I don't find it very muddy, but if you look up here around this 1 or 2K region, you don't really have the pinna gain coming in here, so it does make it sound a little hazy. This 3K peak, like I said, does salvage the vocals a little bit, but I mostly hear it when it comes to an electric guitar. Sometimes you just hear the tone of the guitar, just especially when it's playing a lead guitar noise, it kind of cuts right through and you hear it pop in and then it kind of like fades out. It's not the best. And then of course right after that it kind of dies around here. So one thing I forgot to mention was that I don't find these to be sibilant in any way. I don't find these to be fatiguing in any way because there isn't really much of that lower treble at all really. This 8K peak here is more of the coupler resonance, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it does have these other peaks. So this 9K peak and this peak up here, I do hear that when I do a sine wave sweep, so these aren't kind of like aberrant peaks here. But like I was saying earlier, as a whole, the treble does start to roll off, and I don't consider it a bright IEM. There's not a lot of air to it. Now, one thing I do want to also point out though here is it has a comparator IEM in the final audio F7200, so 7200. I'm pulling up Clinical's graph here and you can see kind of what it looks like. You can see that they look and measure almost identically, with the exception of the bass extension is a bit better on the X49 and it has quite a lot more bass, but otherwise they measure very, very similarly. So I just thought it'd be pretty interesting. I'm not sure if this is like a exact clone of the final audio stuff or if it's just like a coincidence, but this IEM costs $20 while the final audio F7200 I think costs a couple of hundred. So you're looking at almost 10-15 times price difference there. So I think that's basically all I wanted to mention. Like I said earlier, to conclude, I guess, not sure if I would buy this for myself as a daily driver in-ear. $20 is cheap, I guess. $20 Canadian actually it's pretty cheap, but I can't really see myself really enjoying it too much when the cable is so it's not great. Like it's really horrible when you have it and you make a lot of cable noise. The in-ears are okay, but they tend to fit only a very specific genre, and for me that genre, like I mentioned, are kind of slower songs, more ballad type of songs. It's kind of more jazz, sort of slow jazz, things that have warm vocals. It doesn't require a lot of clarity in the actual song itself to cleanly separate the instruments. Japanese city pop type of songs actually perform decently on these, especially because of how well produced they are. These really take advantage of songs that are well produced. If you throw something like a rock or metal track at it that isn't as well produced with a lot of instruments going on, it's going to suffer, and really I think there's better in-ears to get. Personally, once again, $20 is cheap, but I would rather save up the money and buy something like the Tin Audio T2 Plus. For me, that at $50, that's kind of like my gold standard to go to. Or sometimes you can find really good deals on Etymotic IEMs for, right now the ER2 SE is $69, and that's a really crazy deal. So I would get that instead. I know the price is 3 times more, but I would rather buy those and be happy for a year rather than buy these and look to start upgrading within a month. I would get these as kind of like a pair of beater IEMs. If you just need something for the gym, something like that, something you can throw around, maybe give to your sister, I don't know. But personally, like I said, don't think I would probably buy it myself. If you do like this kind of tuning, I think it's actually worth buying for this type of tuning. It's pretty unique, and if you want to compare it to the Final Audio F7200, that might be interesting to do, just to see if you like this sort of tuning. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I've rambled on a bit too long here. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just put it in the comments. Thanks so much.